Hello friends, I'm Jordan Jones, and me and my associates are here to talk to you today about the American Revolution. I personally will be talking about the battles of Lexington, Concord, and the Battle of Yorktown, and also the surrender of Lower Cornwallis.
Hello, my name is Dylan Knight, and I'll be talking about the Second Continental Congress and life in the Continental Army.
Hi, my name is Robbie Smith, and I'm going to be explaining to you about the winter at Valley Forge and the Battle of Bunker Hill. And now it's time for us to explain to you all of our main topics.
There were 77 Minutemen waiting for the British at Lexington. Once the Brits arrived, they ordered the colonists to be moved. The men had started to disperse once the shot heard round the world rang out. Both sides started fighting, and thus started the first battle of the American Revolution. 8 men were killed and 9 wounded. The Brits only had 2 men killed and considered themselves victorious. The British continued their march up to Concord to follow out their orders. But by the time they were approaching Concord, Minutemen had begun to assemble. The colonists took a position on the hills on the north side of the town, and the British had occupied the ridge by the road. The colonists secured the north bridge while the British looked for weapons. The town hall and Reuben's harness shop were set on fire by the Brits. Once the colonists saw the smoke, they planned their attack on the British. Once the Brits saw the Americans, they opened fire. The Americans returned fire with a greater force, and soon the British fled in confusion. 3 were dead and 9 wounded. These 500 militia fought and defended 3 companies of the King's troops. Lexington and Concord was a great victory for the colonists, but it was only the beginning.
The Second Continental Congress was a group of delegates from the 13 colonies that first met beginning on May 11, 1775. Many of the delegates from the First Continental Congress returned, and the most notable newcomers were Benjamin Franklin from Pennsylvania and John Hancock from Massachusetts. Peyton Randolph, president of the First Continental Congress, was made president of the Second as well. After 2 weeks, he was called to preside over the House of Burgesses in Virginia. Many weeks later, Thomas Jefferson arrived as a new delegate for Virginia. The remaining delegates elected Henry Middleton to be president, but he declined, so John Hancock was elected president on May 24th. Georgia didn't participate in the First or Second Continental Congress, but on May 13, 1775, Lyman Hall joined as a delegate from the parish of St. John's in Georgia, but not for the actual state itself. Georgia did finally decide to send delegates on July 8th, and they arrived on July 20th. Their main duty was to support the war effort and act almost like our government does whenever we're in war. On June 14, 1775, Congress voted to create the Continental Army out of the militia units and appointed George Washington of Virginia as the commanding general. The British had better tactics and better weaponry, while the colonists had little war experience and had poor weaponry. Life in the Continental Army was very tiring, both on the body and the mind. Low resources constantly plagued the soldiers. Morale was always changing for them, and there were several accounts of people coming out of their homes to help the Continental Army. Seeing how their numbers kept adding greatly inspired the soldiers. Thomas Paine's common sense was a great inspiration, and all the soldiers who could not read listened to the others who could. Sometimes soldiers would have to go through killing neighbors or even family members who were loyalists and joined the British armies.
The Battle of Bunker Hill took place on June 17, 1775, and was one of the very first battles of the war. The Americans attempted to fortify Bunker and Breed's Hill, but the plan failed. The British arrived in numbers and quickly won the battle, but the Americans did not give up. They only lost 400 soldiers out of the thousands that they already had, and knew that they could stand up against the British forces. After defeating the Americans at the Battle of Germantown, the British took advantage. George Washington led the badly beaten soldiers to Valley Forge to camp for the winter. The winter was harsh and cold. Troops had to bunk in damp, crowded quarters, and many suffered from lack of adequate clothing and proper food. Washington quickly took notice to these issues. In turn, he got the soldiers the clothes they needed, food to eat, and improved their living conditions. Washington also called Baron von Steuben, a French general, to better train the troops in combat. His training improved the troops' fighting skills and tactics, and soon enough the soldiers were prepared for battle again. The winter became a great turning point for America.
The Battle of Yorktown proved to be the last major battle of the war, ending with the surrender of Cornwallis. The Americans proved victorious along with the help of the French. The American and the French armies united north of New York in 1781. General Washington led the American forces, while Comte de Rochambeau led the French forces against the British. The armies moved south to Virginia, deceiving the enemy to believe a siege on New York was planned. The French commander de Grasse led the French West Indies fleet. Grasse defeated Cornwallis at the Battle of Chesapeake, and in doing so he blocked any escape by sea. By late September, Washington had arrived and the army and naval forces completely surrounded Cornwallis. After initial preparations, the Americans and French built their first parallel and began bombardment greatly on the British. On October 14, 1781, Washington sent 2 columns to attack the last remaining British outer defense. Cornwallis asked for capitulation on the 17th, and after 2 days of negotiation, the surrender ceremony took place. Negotiations took place between Great Britain and the U.S., resulting in the Treaty of Paris in 1783. The British Army surrendered at Yorktown, Virginia in 1781, while under the command of Lord General Cornwallis. This battle ended the last major campaign for the Revolutionary War. Early in September, with an army of 7,000 men, including German mercenaries, Cornwallis had hoped to escape by the sea, but the French fleet had surrounded them. General Washington was the commander of the American forces, and within weeks he amassed an army larger than that of the British. In early October, the general's artillery bombarded the British positions. Cornwallis surrendered on the 19th of October after the American and French troops overran 2 British strongholds. The War for American Independence was a great and inspiring part of our history, and hopefully we have brought to you a better understanding of it.